Now, delighted to welcome back to the studio Veronica Canning. You are now on book number 7. It's exhausting even trying to keep up with you. Veronica, you're well respected, well known as a consultant to both companies and individuals. And when we talk about individuals, I suppose the current publication is directly targeted at individuals as professionals within an organisation. It's called Your Brand, Advance Your Career by Building a Personal Brand. I suppose the first obvious question is, what is a personal brand, Veronica?
My definition of a personal brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. And in Ireland, I think people are so articulate and witty that usually it's one pithy statement, or one word. They'll say, well, oh, there he goes, difficult. Or there they go, oh, one to watch. Tricky.
Yeah. Interesting, yeah.
Ambitious. And it can come down to a word or a phrase. And my whole thing in writing this book was I work a lot with individuals, high potential, quite senior people who are already good at their job. So they've been spotted as being talented. There's no problem about increasing their productivity or their actual work. But in working with people, I used to say, well, okay, we'll work out a career goal for you. We'll work out a big, audacious career aim for you. And we did that. And then it began to dawn on me that, 50% of people would go on to the next level and beyond, and 50% wouldn't. And you began to think, well, it's not their work. It's not that they're not good at their job. What's happening? And it's like as if there's two scorecards. There's the scorecard that gets you to be quite a senior accountant or lawyer or marketing executive. And then you just stall and you don't go to the next level. And in working with people, what I've figured out is that is all wrapped up in their personal brand. It's what other people think of them. It's their behaviours. It's how they turn up. It's not just the work.
Yeah, I mean, I was at a presentation by a motivational speaker there just a few weeks ago. Jerry Duffy was his name. He's be well known in Ireland as the guy who did 32 marathons in 32 days.
Oh, yes.
And, it's fascinating listening to him, and there's an echo in what you say and what he was saying, this idea that, people as athletes all have innate talents, but there's a grittiness, and also there's a way in which certain people have this confidence about them that's picked up on by others in a way that's positive, that reflects well on them, and that it is something that you can work on.
Oh yes, I think a personal brand, at the root of a personal brand is you the person, and of course confidence. But there are things like, how optimistic are you? How pessimistic are you? How resilient are you? So a person with a personal brand of resilience is really a sought after person in today's world, because it makes them stand out. Are they, how confident are they? How much do they like themselves so that other people can like them? And that's the rudiments really of getting on in your career, is, do I like working with you? Do I find you a can-do person? Are you a problem person?
So the language that you're using there is interesting to me, because you're not necessarily talking about the language of identity and creating an aura, but you're talking about that something has to be essential to you and as it were shaping how you communicate that. But it's not something that's false. I mean, I think a lot of people recoil when they hear personal branding. They think, well, there's a certain charlatan at play here. That's what makes people nervous.
There's two reactions that I dread. One is that the person says it's all about how you look, which there couldn't be more a shallow brand. And the other is it's about creating something fake, like a suit of armour. And you do see people doing that, and you also see it derailing. So what I'm talking about is very authentic. I'm talking about being the best version of yourself. And I think you can do that.
And in your book, you lay it out in quite a structured approach. You have an eight-step model to actually approaching this task. Quickly maybe go through the 8 steps, and if we have time, we'll go through some of the specific ones.
Well, I think what it starts with is the person, because I do not believe in building anything other than an authentic, totally authentic brand. So that is discovering yourself. And when I work with people, I'm actually quite surprised how little they know about themselves. Like, for example, somebody will say to you, Veronica, I'm a very straightforward person. And I always say, okay, so how's that going for you? And it's usually not going very well. Because remember, the brand is what other people say about you. It's not what you say about yourself. So I could say, I'm a very hard worker, I'm brilliant. But you might think, no, actually you're a hard worker, but you're very difficult to deal with. So the second step is finding out what other people think about you. And in doing that, I say, find out from certain selected people who will give you positive, constructive feedback. I think in Ireland we like to ask people, would you please tell me what's wrong with me so I can fix it? I'm thinking, no, please tell me what my signature strengths are so I can build on them. So there's a whole piece around knowing yourself. And the next couple of steps are around behaviour. And that is, what makes a first impression? How can you be of value to the company? So I'm talking about quite deep stuff. I'm not talking about light behaviour. But one of the things I think is the newest thing out there that people are beginning to talk about. And that is what happens when you derail in your career. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know...
I'm sure you've had lots of people come to you with... I mean, we see some high-profile people whose personal brand is derailed. We won't mention names, but you know, people know who we're probably talking about, where their brand was constructed, well, maybe that's not the right word, but you know, they had a very clear brand image, and in a sense, even their failure in business, in a sense, affected how people see their brand. But you're talking about not just those instances, but
no,
you know, it can be more minor failures, I guess.
Yes, I'm talking about something that say it's not talking about the outliers. I'm talking about the average person, the average executive, and how I define a derailer is something that was a signature strength for you, which, if overused, derails you. I'll give you an example to make it clear. Say somebody is a workaholic, and I called my model there Workaholic Wendy. And so Workaholic Wendy has always worked very well, drove people, gave results, very results driven. And what company doesn't like a results driven person? So they have massive campaigns, they launch products, they do very, very well. But in the doing of that, they are driving everybody around them and themselves. And they get success. That's the payoff. But when do they derail? They derail when people start saying, I can't work for that person. And the staff turnover goes up. And they get a 360-degree evaluation. And everybody says, you're great. You deliver results. And then there's a but with 10 things that you have to change. And then they realise they've got to a certain level, senior manager of director, and they're not getting from senior manager to director, or they're not getting from director to VP, because they have derailed and that people don't like that about them. That's a really concrete example of a derailer. So I have 9 in the book, and they're all coming from actual examples that I have worked with of derailing. But then when you've done that, the other concept I think that's quite new and interesting is the concept of holding and leaking your power. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about that at speeches and conferences. And you know, Alex, by the silence, that people get what leaking power is. So it's if you've got a good brand and you're doing very well, and all of a sudden you realise you're being shut out of the company, you're not being consulted, people aren't listening to you, something has gone wrong. And I have a lot of examples of how you could take that back. And I notice with behaviours, you know, I'm not being listened to in a meeting. I am not influencing. Lots of people would say that to me. I know I'm very good, but I'm not having influence. What's happening? Mm-hmm. And then the final thing is, if you've got a great brand, you've plugged up all the holes, you're not derailing anymore, where do you position it? Yeah. And that brings you into the whole area of your matrix. And I find there's a lot of time devoted to teaching you and developing you as a manager of other people. Mm-hmm. But I don't think we pay enough attention to managing upwards. Yeah. And I have a whole thing
now
about...
Explain what you mean by that term, managing upwards.
Managing upwards. So say I'm a middle-level person in a company and I'm ambitious and I want to go up. And I'm working on doing well, and I'm doing the good worker syndrome, doing all the work, you know, getting it done, answering to my boss. But there's a whole matrix of people, your peers, the people beneath you, and maybe your boss's boss, and across the board. And that's particularly so in Irish companies who've overseas offices, or a Dublin-based and has regional offices, or a multinational, where you might be working up a line to bosses who aren't even in the country. Okay? Yeah. So they are the people who are talking about you. And they are saying good or bad. And the talent spotters are looking across the company and saying who stands out. Mm-hmm. Now, there's no point in being a legend in your own garage. Yeah. You thinking that you're fantastic. Mm-hmm. You need to look at these people and see, do they know how good you are?
Yeah. And a couple of other questions that strike me as relevant in this context, I don't know if you touch on it in the book, is social media and social channels. For example, today, a lot of executives have, they manage two personas to a degree. They manage the tweets to make it very practical for a company. But they've also got their own personal Facebook page, and particularly LinkedIn and Twitter these days. I mean, have you any advice because at one level, that's a fantastic opportunity to create a personal brand, even in the largest, most diverse organisation, you can still have a voice. Obviously, companies have policies around this, but what sort of advice would you give to the individual first and maybe afterwards to a company?
Well, I think the worst thing is to be really good at social media and put out an inauthentic brand or a damaged one.
Yeah.
It's better to not be known than to be known for the wrong things. So I would principally say you need to have a good, authentic brand. And then you need to, why would I want to know about you? You need to be offering me useful information. You need to be of value to me. So if you are building a big profile, build it on how useful and valuable you are, rather than, the worst thing would be just a vainglorious.
Yeah. And what about company? It strikes me that, companies may have reservations about this. The flip side of that is that if they have talented employees who have have an ability to develop a following, a conversation, even as the individual, but that they're reflecting occasionally a lot of what the company's doing, that's something that companies should celebrate, and I know some companies do. What do you think about Irish companies? Are they quite happy for employees to, as it were, create their own personal virtual brand, or do you get instances where they say, actually, we prefer that you didn't sort of?
I think that very much depends on the company. A law firm is not going to want that. Somewhere where confidentiality, they're not going to want that. Banking. But I think if you're in an outreach industry, a creative industry, you're in marketing or advertising or
I see
TV.
That a lot, actually. You're right. I would see that a lot in at advertising and marketing worlds, where people, I suppose it's part of their genetic makeup.
Yeah, and it's to celebrate creativity, and they are probably already preordained to be outgoing.
Yes.
So it's an extension of them, and I think as long as it's authentic and it is of value, I can't see any value in an individual competing with their own company.
Yeah.
But if it's congruent with the aims of the company, I think it's. Why not?
Yeah. Now, what's interesting to me as well is the source of the publisher here, which is the Chartered Accountants Ireland.
Yes.
That intrigues me, because I know in the past on this programme I've had accountants, I've had legal professionals, etc. I know there is a PMI, I think it's called Professional Marketers Institute. Professional Marketers Forum, I think it is, in Ireland, which is a marketing group for professionals in these type of industries. But that interests me that they're supporting this initiative.
It is, yes. I met the publisher Michael Divany, and we saw common ground that people in these companies at mid-level may not know a lot about this, but it is very important for them. And they've got 26,000 members, so it's fantastic to partner with the Chartered Accountants.
And I think you're right. I think it's one of those areas where real differential advantage can be created for companies around working with their top performers to create their own personal brands. Veronica, as ever, I'd like to talk a bit longer, but the book again is Your Brand, Advance Your Career by Building a Personal Brand. If people want to get a copy, it's
in all the bookstores, and you can get it from www.veronicacanning.com. We'll sort it out for you.
Super. Thanks for coming into our studio.